It was just past 8 in the morning, and the little diner on Main Street was quieter than usual. The smell of brewing coffee hung in the air like a comforting blanket, mixing with the faint scent of toasted bread and fried eggs. James, a 24-year-old waiter with messy brown hair and eyes that had seen more disappointment than joy, wiped down the chipped wooden tables, thinking about bills, rent, and dreams he wasn't sure would ever come true. Then she walked in. She wasn't the kind of person who demanded attention. She didn't wear flashy clothes or expensive perfume, but there was something about her presence, gentle, soft, almost like a sigh of calm in the chaos of the world. She chose the same booth every day, by the window that framed the morning sun just perfectly. Her order was simple: black coffee, lightly toasted bagel, a quiet smile that barely touched her lips. James didn't know her name yet. He didn't know her story, and honestly, he didn't even know why, but the air seemed different when she was there, like the diner had suddenly become a safer, softer place. The first time she left a tip, it was only $1. James didn't think much of it, but when he picked up the bill, he noticed a small folded note underneath the single dollar. Curious, he opened it. "Thank you for making the world feel kinder. One smile at a time." James paused. His heart skipped a beat. It was simple, and yet it hit him in a way he couldn't explain. The next day she came again. Same booth, same order, same quiet presence. And once again a $1 tip with a folded note. This time it read, "Your kindness doesn't go unnoticed. Keep shining." Day after day it continued. Dollar after dollar, note after note. Some were encouraging, some were poetic, and some were strangely personal, as if she somehow knew the weight he carried on his shoulders. James found himself looking forward to her visits. The mundane rhythm of the diner, the endless cycle of orders, complaints, and coffee stains, suddenly had meaning. He started leaving a little extra in his own life, smiling at strangers, listening more, helping without being asked. But he didn't know why she did it. Who was she? What was her story? And why did a single dollar and a tiny note feel more valuable than any paycheck he'd ever earned? That morning, as he polished the counter, he realized something. He didn't just want to serve her coffee. He wanted to know her story. And somehow, he had a feeling that when he finally read her longest note, everything would change. The next morning, the diner smelled of fresh coffee and the faint tang of fried bacon, but James hardly noticed. His mind was elsewhere, wondering if she would come again. And she did, like clockwork, sliding into her usual booth by the sunlit window. She seemed even quieter today, shoulders slightly hunched, fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup as if drawing invisible patterns in the steam. James approached carefully, trying not to disturb the fragile bubble of calm she carried around her. "Morning," he said, attempting casual warmth. She looked up briefly, and for a fraction of a second her eyes, warm, hazel, and deep, met his. There was a story there, one that she wasn't ready to tell aloud, but her gaze, it spoke volumes. "Morning," she replied softly, her voice like the rustle of autumn leaves. Her order was the same: black coffee, lightly toasted bagel, no butter. It had become a ritual, unspoken, comfortable, almost sacred. James carried her order over and placed it gently on the table, noticing the subtle way she thanked him with a tilt of her head. He wondered why a person so gentle seemed to live in silence, like the world had demanded she hide her brightness. As she finished her breakfast, she folded a small piece of paper with meticulous care. James' heart, by now, had started to race whenever he saw her hand reach for that folded note. Today's note read differently, less poetic, more intimate. "I notice you, even when the world doesn't. Even when no one says thank you, even when you feel invisible. I see your kindness, it matters." James held the note, staring at the words. He felt exposed, as if someone had looked straight into his soul. He realized then that her little ritual wasn't just about the money, it was about connection. It was her way of reaching out, of saying, "You are seen." The days passed, each note a lifeline. Some spoke of hope, some of resilience, some of quiet heartbreak. And James began to recognize the patterns in her handwriting, the tiny flourishes that hinted at her emotions. The way the letters slanted slightly when she was sad, how she underlined certain words when she wanted them to land heavier. One evening, after the diner closed, James found himself lingering near her booth, imagining what her life might be like outside these walls. Who did she live with? Did she have dreams she had to hide? Why did she come here every day just for a coffee and a $1 tip? That night, James couldn't sleep. He read her notes over and over in his mind, memorizing the curves of her words, the hidden messages of empathy and courage. And he realized something terrifying. He had started to depend on them not just for curiosity but for hope. For the first time in months, he felt like someone cared, not just for his job, not just for his smile, but for him, the person behind the apron and the tired eyes. The next morning, the diner felt different when she walked in. It wasn't just her presence anymore. It was a rhythm, a heartbeat he hadn't known he was waiting for. And today, when he reached her table, he noticed something he hadn't before. A small envelope, slightly heavier than her usual notes. His pulse quickened. She looked up and smiled softly, almost shyly, and whispered, "I think you should read this one carefully." James hesitated, hands trembling slightly. He knew it would be different. He had a sense, deep in his bones, that the words inside this envelope would change everything between them, maybe even his entire perspective on life. And as he slowly opened it, his breath caught. The note was long, messy in some places, heartfelt in others. It spoke of loss, of surviving heartbreak, of witnessing his quiet generosity without knowing how deeply it mattered. It concluded with one simple line that made James' chest tighten. "I've left $1 every day because it was the only way I could reach you, the only way I could show you that someone notices, that someone cares." James sat there holding the note, feeling as if the world had shifted just a little. The diner, the sunlight, the smell of coffee, all of it seemed charged with meaning now. And for the first time, he realized she wasn't just a customer. She was a messenger, a silent hero in her own way. And her story was just beginning. The diner was quieter than usual that Wednesday afternoon, the lunch rush having passed without much fanfare. James wiped down the tables, but his thoughts weren't on cleaning or orders. They were on her. Leila Monroe, the quiet visitor who had become the pulse of his mornings, the one whose tiny notes made his heart ache and swell all at once. She walked in, slightly later than usual, carrying a worn leather satchel that looked like it had survived years of commuting, rain, and careless handling. Today, her eyes held a deeper sadness, shadows that didn't usually appear in the morning light. She settled into her booth, fingers nervously tracing the edges of her cup. James approached cautiously, careful not to disturb her fragile presence. "Coffee?" he asked softly. She nodded, barely making eye contact, and whispered, "Yes, please, black." As he poured her coffee and set it down, James noticed something he hadn't before. Her hands trembled slightly. He wanted to ask if she was okay, to offer some kind of comfort, but he didn't know if it was his place. Instead, he simply smiled, and she returned it faintly, almost reluctantly. When she left her usual $1 tip and slipped a note under it, James felt the familiar flutter of curiosity and anticipation. He unfolded it carefully. Some days are harder than others. I used to think no one noticed the little things, the kindness people offer quietly. Life taught me differently. It taught me that even the smallest gestures, like a smile or a moment of patience, can change someone's world. I see you. I notice your patience, your quiet strength, even when you think no one does. James sat there for a long time, staring at the words. Something about the note felt more personal today, more vulnerable, as if she was letting him glimpse her own wounds without saying a single word. Curiosity gnawed at him. Who was she outside this diner? The way she wrote, the care in her notes, it suggested a depth that went beyond ordinary life. And one question kept echoing in his mind. Why did she trust him, a mere waiter, with pieces of her soul every single day? Later that evening, when James closed the diner, he found himself walking slowly past the park across the street. He imagined her life. Early mornings filled with rushed commutes, lonely apartments, quiet dinners, and a world that seemed too loud, too indifferent. And in that imagining, he realized something profound. Her notes weren't just acts of kindness for him. They were her way of coping with a world that had hurt her. The next morning, she arrived earlier than usual, her eyes brighter, but a hint of worry lingered in the corners. James set her coffee on the table, and she smiled at him in a way that seemed to carry gratitude, guilt, and longing all at once. When she left her note, James could feel the weight in her handwriting. "I've lost a lot, James. People, places, moments I can't get back. But leaving these dollars and notes for you, it's a way of saying that even in loss, hope can be shared. Even in pain, connection is possible. Thank you for being someone worth noticing." James' hand shook slightly as he read it. For the first time, he understood. Leela wasn't just quiet because she was shy. She was quiet because she had endured things that the world hadn't prepared her for. And she was learning slowly that there were people who could see her, not just the surface, not just the polite smile, but the real her. And for the first time, James realized something terrifying and wonderful at the same time. He cared for her, not just the mystery of her notes or the ritual of her daily visits, but for her. For Leela, the girl who had quietly given him hope, piece by piece, dollar by dollar. And he knew, if he didn't find a way to reach her beyond the notes, to speak to her beyond the dollars, he might never know the full story of the girl who had become his heartbeat in the early mornings. The next morning, the diner smelled of fresh coffee and sizzling bacon, but James barely noticed the aroma. His mind was consumed with one thought: today, I will do something. For weeks, he had been the silent recipient of Leela Monroe's small acts of kindness, $1 tips accompanied by notes that felt like tiny lifelines. And now, for the first time, he felt a need to reach back, to speak without words, to let her know that her gestures mattered as much as they had made him feel. When she arrived, carrying her worn satchel, her hair falling softly around her face, James felt a nervous thrill he couldn't explain. She smiled faintly as she slid into her booth. And for the first time, James noticed the way her fingers lingered on the table edge, as if seeking some grounding in the world. Her order was the same: black coffee, lightly toasted bagel. He set it down in front of her, trying to keep his hand steady. Today, however, there was something different. Beneath her usual $1 tip, he had slipped a small folded note of his own, almost trembling as he did it. It read simply, "I see you too." He watched from behind the counter as she picked it up. Her eyes widened slightly, and a faint blush crept over her cheeks. For a moment, the diner felt suspended in time. No clinking dishes, no sizzling bacon, no background chatter, just the soft rustle of her unfolding his note. Her lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. Instead, she traced the tiny handwriting with her fingertip, her hazel eyes shimmering in the morning light. James felt a strange warmth, a rush of connection stronger than anything he had known before. Over the next few days, their notes became a dialogue of emotions neither of them dared to speak aloud. James wrote small things: a compliment about her smile, a thank you for reminding him that kindness existed, a shared joke about the diner's old jukebox. Each note he left felt like a heartbeat in the quiet rhythm of their mornings. And Leela responded slowly but surely. Her notes became more personal, more revealing. Small fragments of her dreams, her fears, and the loneliness she carried like a shadow. One morning she wrote, "I've never met anyone who notices the invisible parts of people, the parts no one else sees. Thank you for seeing me." James read the note twice, his chest tightening. Seeing her words, he realized that their small, silent exchanges had become a lifeline for both of them. She was no longer just a mysterious customer. She was someone who had stepped into the fragile corners of his life, illuminating them with quiet courage. That afternoon, as he wiped down tables, James caught himself imagining a future outside the diner, a world where they didn't need notes to communicate, where he could finally say the words he had been holding back for weeks. And yet there was a lingering fear, a shadow in the warmth. What if revealing himself too soon broke the fragile trust they had built? What if the connection they had formed through notes, so pure, so tentative, couldn't survive the weight of words spoken aloud? For now, all he could do was wait and watch, and let the quiet ritual of dollars and words continue. Because in that slow, careful exchange, something extraordinary was growing, a bond neither of them fully understood, yet both felt with every glance, every folded note, every small gesture. And for the first time in a long while, James allowed himself to hope, not just for love, but for something deeper, a connection that could survive silence, hardship, and the weight of the world. The diner had grown quieter in the late morning, the hum of the street outside barely seeping through the windows. James moved between tables with a practiced rhythm, but his eyes kept drifting toward the familiar booth by the window. Leela Monroe had arrived early today, as if sensing something he couldn't quite name. She carried her satchel, slightly heavier than usual, and her eyes held a distant look, the kind that spoke of memories she wasn't ready to share aloud. When James approached with her usual black coffee and toasted bagel, she offered a faint, almost weary smile. "Morning, James," she said, her voice softer than usual, tinged with a quiet hesitancy. "Morning, Leela," he replied, placing the plate before her. "Everything okay?" She paused, fingers brushing the edge of the cup, then looked out the window. I've had better mornings," she admitted softly, almost as if she were speaking to herself. James' heart tightened. He wanted to reach across the table to offer words, a hand, something, anything that might make her pain lighter. But he hesitated. He had learned that patience was part of the trust she allowed him. When she left her $1 tip today, the folded note felt heavier than usual. James picked it up with trembling hands, unfolding it carefully. "Some things from my past, they follow me. Shadows of people I lost, mistakes I made, choices I couldn't undo. I try to keep them locked away, but some mornings they catch up to me. I leave these notes for you because it feels safer to share with someone I trust, someone who sees me without judgment." James read the note twice, then a third time, his chest aching with a mix of empathy and longing. For the first time, he understood the depth of her struggle. Her kindness, her tiny acts of generosity weren't just gestures. They were lifelines, attempts to bridge her pain to something meaningful. That afternoon, James found himself sitting alone in the diner after closing hours, replaying her note in his mind. Shadows of her past, fragments of her life hinted at in her words, weighed on him, and he realized that their connection wasn't just a gentle ritual anymore. It was real, fragile, and terrifyingly human. The next day, James decided to take a small risk. He left a note of his own, placed gently beneath the usual $1 bill. "You don't have to carry it alone. Even shadows can't stay when someone is willing to walk beside you." He watched discreetly as she discovered it. Her hand froze over the note, and for the first time her eyes glistened, not with sadness but with something raw and honest. Relief. She looked toward him but didn't speak. A subtle nod, almost imperceptible, passed between them. A silent acknowledgement of trust, of understanding, of connection. For the first time, James realized that their bond had evolved beyond notes, dollars, or daily routines. It was becoming something deeper, a shared space of vulnerability, a quiet promise that no one had to face the world entirely alone. That night, James couldn't stop thinking about her. He imagined walking beside her through the shadows of her past, easing the burden she carried so gracefully yet silently. And somewhere deep inside, he knew the next step, speaking aloud, not just through folded notes, was coming. Because kindness had sparked something stronger than curiosity, something that demanded courage. And James had never felt more ready or more terrified to meet it head-on. The diner was unusually bright that morning, sunlight spilling across the worn wooden floors, casting golden patterns on the tables. James was already on edge, more aware than ever of her presence. Leela Monroe entered as usual, but today she seemed different. There was a tension in her shoulders, a flicker in her hazel eyes, as if the world outside had followed her here. James approached with her coffee and bagel, heart pounding. "Morning, Leela," he said, trying to sound casual. She looked up and gave a small, fragile smile. "Morning, James." Something in the pause between them spoke louder than any words. He set the plate down carefully, and for a brief moment they just looked at each other, the air charged with unspoken emotion. When she left her $1 tip, James noticed her hand linger over the note, trembling slightly. He unfolded it, his chest tightening at the careful, messy script. "I've built walls around my heart for years. I thought if I stayed quiet, no one would see the cracks. But you notice them anyway. And it terrifies me because I don't know how to let anyone in. I'm scared, James. Scared that kindness is temporary, that people leave, that I'll be left alone with my shadows again." James read the note 3 times, his mind and heart struggling to process the raw vulnerability in her words. She was revealing herself in a way no one had ever dared to, and he felt the weight of responsibility pressing on him. This wasn't just a connection, it was a fragile trust, delicate as glass. That evening, after the diner closed, James stayed behind, cleaning slowly, as if buying himself time to think. He couldn't wait another day. He had to speak, had to reach her in a way that went beyond notes, dollars, or routine. The next morning, he arrived early, setting up her usual booth with a quiet reverence. When she walked in, he could see the hesitation in her step, the subtle guarding of herself. He approached and, for the first time, spoke words that were not written. "Leela, I don't know if this is too soon or if it's even okay, but you don't have to be alone. Not here, not ever, if you don't want to be." She froze, eyes widening. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The diner, with its morning chatter and clatter of dishes, faded into silence. And then slowly she sat back, a single tear slipping down her cheek. I don't know how to do this," she whispered, voice trembling. "I don't know how to let someone in without fearing they'll leave too." James knelt slightly beside her booth, careful to give her space, yet close enough to offer comfort. "I'm not going anywhere," he said softly. "Not for as long as you'll let me stay." Her hand, hesitant at first, brushed against his across the table. It was a small gesture, almost imperceptible, but it spoke of trust, of connection, of walls starting to crumble. In that moment, James realized the significance of the $1 tips, the folded notes, and the quiet mornings they had shared. Each note had been a bridge, every dollar a symbol, leading them to this fragile, beautiful intersection of hearts. And for the first time, he dared to imagine a future where the walls didn't feel so heavy, where shadows could be faced together, and where two people, scarred, weary, hopeful, could finally step into the light, side by side. The diner was quiet that morning, the kind of silence that seemed to hum with expectation. James watched the door anxiously as Leela walked in, her usual calm demeanor slightly fractured. There was a tension in her eyes, a storm she hadn't yet revealed. He approached her booth, coffee in hand, heart thudding. "Morning," he said softly. She nodded but didn't speak. The air between them was heavy with unspoken words. James set down the coffee and bagel, and for a moment they simply sat, letting the morning light fill the space between them. Then, with a trembling hand, she placed her $1 tip on the table. James noticed a folded envelope, thicker than usual, almost pleading to be opened. He picked it up carefully, unfolding the note inside. "I haven't told anyone this. Maybe no one will ever know, but I think you deserve to. My father, he wasn't kind. Life at home was cold, harsh, full of words that cut deeper than anything else. I learned early that silence was safer than speaking, that hiding meant survival. I left home when I was 19, hopping to find warmth, safety, someone who would see me for me." James read the words slowly, feeling the weight of her history press against his chest. The note continued, "The world hasn't been gentle since. I've watched people leave, betray, disappoint, and yet I still believe in small acts of kindness. I leave the dollars, the notes, because they are proof that the world isn't entirely cruel. And now I leave them for you because you are kind in ways that feel impossible to ignore. You see me, and it terrifies me how much I need that." James felt a lump in his throat. Her words weren't just vulnerable. They were a raw, unfiltered confession of pain, hope, and trust. He realized that every note, every dollar was a lifeline thrown across the void of her past. And now, she had thrown it to him. He swallowed hard and whispered almost to himself, "You're not alone, Leela. Not anymore." She looked up, her hazel eyes glistening, searching his face for a hint of doubt or rejection. Finding none, a faint, shaky smile emerged. For the first time, she spoke her fear aloud. I don't know if I can let anyone in, James. Not really. I've learned to survive alone." He reached across the table, placing his hand over hers. The gesture was gentle, reassuring, and full of quiet promise. "You can try," he said softly. "And if you fall, I'll be here. You won't have to do it alone anymore." A single tear traced her cheek, and she allowed herself to lean just slightly toward him. Not physically, not yet, but emotionally, bridging a gap that had existed for years. That morning, the diner didn't just smell of coffee and toast. It smelled of beginnings. Beginnings of trust, of courage, of two people choosing to face their fears together, one heartbeat at a time. James realized something profound. The $1 tips, the folded notes, the morning spent in silence. They were never just small gestures. They were bridges across loneliness, paths leading to a place where hearts could heal and where love, quiet, gentle, resilient love, could finally take root. And for the first time, James dared to hope that the world, even in all its harshness, could hold something extraordinary for both of them. The diner's morning light spilled across the tables in streaks of gold and amber, illuminating the quiet corners where James and Leela had shared so many moments of unspoken connection. Today felt different. The air itself seemed charged, as if the world was holding its breath. Leela entered, sat down at her usual booth, and for the first time in weeks, she didn't reach for her satchel immediately. She just looked at the sunlight reflecting off the tabletop, eyes distant, thoughtful, almost resolute. James approached, carrying her black coffee and lightly toasted bagel. His heart thudded in anticipation. He had a feeling today was going to change everything. She looked up at him and whispered, "James, I think I'm ready." Ready? The word echoed in his mind, heavy with hope and fear. Ready for what? He asked softly, careful not to rush her. She took a deep breath, trembling slightly. "To tell you everything. My past, my fears, everything I've held inside. And not just in notes. I want you to know me, really know me." James felt a lump in his throat. Her trust, her leap of faith was immense, and he wanted to honor it in every possible way. "I'm listening, Leela, always." Her hand trembled as she placed her folded $1 tip on the table. Today, the note inside was heavier than ever. She handed it to him directly, her hazel eyes searching his, waiting for a reaction. "I was 16 when I lost my mother. I've carried that emptiness ever since. My father, he tried, but he was too broken himself. I learned early that the world can be cruel, that kindness is rare, and love is fragile. I left home, moving from city to city, job to job, always trying to outrun the loneliness. And yet I never gave up hope that someone like you, might see the real me and not walk away." James read it slowly, absorbing every word. The weight of her history, her pain, and her courage pressed against him. This wasn't just a note. It was a soul laid bare. She continued, voice barely above a whisper, "James, I don't know what comes next. I don't even know if we can, but I want to try. I want to see if we can face the world together, not just through notes, but through everything. Can you try with me?" James felt tears sting his eyes. He placed his hand over hers, firm, steady, and full of promise. "I'll try, and I won't let go. We'll face it together every step of the way." For the first time, Leela allowed herself to relax, to let down walls that had protected her for years. She leaned forward slightly, closer than before, and in that small, courageous gesture, the diner felt warmer, safer, as if their shared trust had transformed the space itself. That morning, James realized something profound. The $1 tips, the folded notes, the quiet rituals, they had led to this moment, a leap of trust that bridged two lonely hearts. And in that connection, fragile and beautiful, there was a promise of something extraordinary, a chance for healing, for love, and for a life that neither of them had dared to imagine before. The diner, once just a place of work, had become a sanctuary, a place where hearts could meet, scars could be shared, and courage could flourish. And for James and Leela, the future, uncertain, terrifying, and yet shimmering with possibility, had just begun. The diner felt ordinary that morning, yet James couldn't shake the unease clinging to the edges of his mind. Leela arrived as usual, sliding into her booth with her worn satchel. But today her smile was tentative, almost guarded. There was a weight in her step that hadn't been there before, an invisible tension that made the sunlight feel sharper, the air colder. James approached, placing her coffee and bagel on the table with a practiced calm, but inside his chest raced. "Morning, Leela," he said softly, noticing how her fingers lingered on the edge of the table, as if searching for support. "Morning," she whispered, her voice fragile, carrying a shadow of fear he hadn't seen before. After leaving her usual $1 tip, she slid the note toward him. He unfolded it carefully, and his eyes widened as he read her words. "They found me, the people from my past. I thought I had left it all behind, but it seems the shadows I ran from have followed me here. I don't know what they want or how much they'll hurt me, or us. I'm scared, James. I don't want to lose what we've started, but I can't hide this from you." James felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. Her past, the one she had just begun to share, was crashing into the fragile present they had built together. He reached across the table, taking her hand, holding it tightly. "We'll face this, together. Whatever comes, you're not alone, Leela. Her eyes glistened, but she shook her head slightly. I don't even know if they'll leave me a choice. I thought I could outrun them, but maybe the past doesn't let go. James exhaled slowly, trying to steady his racing thoughts. He realized that love, trust, and hope had become real, tangible forces between them. But life could be cruel, testing those forces in ways they hadn't imagined. Hours later, as the diner emptied and shadows lengthened across the floor, James stayed behind with Leela. They spoke quietly, planning, thinking, and bracing for the unknown. The tension was thick, but in their eyes was the same unspoken vow. Whatever came, they would not let fear break the connection they had fought so hard to build. For the first time, Leela let herself rest against him, just a little, leaning on the trust that had been nurtured through $1 tips, folded notes, and countless quiet mornings. I don't know what's coming, James, but I know I trust you. And I trust you, he replied. We'll face the shadows together. No running, no hiding, just us together. That night the diner felt different. It wasn't just a place to serve coffee or leave notes. It had become a refuge, a battleground, and a sanctuary all at once. And James knew, with a certainty that steadied his heart, that the moments ahead would test them, but also define them. Because the $1 tips, the words, the courage to trust, they had brought them here. And now, whatever the shadows, they would face them side by side, hearts intertwined, ready for the life that was finally within reach. The diner's morning light streamed through the windows, brighter than it had in weeks. James was already there, arranging the chairs and wiping down the counter, but his mind wasn't on chores. It was on her, the girl who had transformed his mornings, his heart, and his quiet life. Leela walked in, sat down at her usual booth, and for the first time there was no hesitation in her step. She seemed lighter, braver, as if the courage they had nurtured together in silence and small gestures had prepared her for today. James brought over her black coffee and lightly toasted bagel, setting them down gently. "Morning, Leela," he said softly, though his chest thudded with anticipation. She looked at him, her hazel eyes steady and filled with quiet determination. "Morning, James." Today's $1 tip felt different in his hand. He unfolded the note inside, bracing himself. "I was afraid, so afraid. Afraid that facing my past would mean losing everything we've built. But I realized something. Love and trust, real trust, are stronger than fear. I don't know what tomorrow holds or what challenges will come, but I do know this. I want you with me, facing it all. Not just in notes, not just in dollars, but in life. I choose you." James felt a lump in his throat. Her words were not just an admission. They were a vow, a bridge across fear, pain, and loneliness. He reached across the table, taking her hands in his. "You have me, Leela, always," he whispered. "No shadows can take this away. We face everything together." She smiled, tears glistening, and for the first time, James noticed the unguarded joy in her expression. It wasn't just relief. It was hope, courage, and love breaking through the cracks of years spent in silence and fear. At that moment, the diner, the place of coffee, $1 tips, and folded notes, felt sacred. It wasn't just a place of work anymore. It was a sanctuary, a home for two hearts that had found each other in the quietest, simplest, most profound way possible. Days turned into weeks, and the ritual of notes became less frequent, not because they didn't need them, but because they had built something stronger: trust, understanding, and a connection that thrived in presence, not just words. And though life remained unpredictable, with shadows still lurking beyond the diner walls, James and Leela faced it hand in hand. Every glance, every smile, every whispered word became a testament to the resilience of hope and the power of small, courageous gestures. A $1 tip, a note, a heartbeat of love. That morning, as sunlight poured through the window and touched their intertwined hands, James realized the truth of what she had been teaching him all along. It's not the size of the gesture, but the heart behind it that can change a life. And in that quiet diner on Main Street, a single dollar had built a bridge across loneliness, fear, and despair, and had led two souls to each other forever.